Hi guys, and welcome to Global Film Pool. This is the channel that reviews the best of world cinema and follows the exciting race for Best International Feature Film. On today's episode, we're going to review Sweden's submission for this year's Academy Awards, and that was Opponent. In this video, I'm going to review the film itself, followed by an analysis of how well it did, and then I'll look at the historic record Sweden has in the particular category, as well as its recent momentum in the awards. Milad Alami's Opponent is about an Iranian wrestler who considers returning to the sport in order to seek refuge in the northernmost part of Sweden with his family. However, this decision opens up cans of worms about his own identity, his family status, and various other conflicting matters. However, his inner turmoil is perhaps his biggest opponent, much more scary than anything he'll ever face on the wrestling mat. Peyman Mardi, a legend of Iranian cinema, who has starred in the award-winning A Separation and many other great Iranian films. He plays the wrestler who flees Iran with his family because there are rumors going around he has criticized the Iranian state. However, as the film progresses, we come to learn that actually it might be something else that is causing him to flee. I think the film is really successful at exploring masculinity through the sport of wrestling. There's this contradiction between wrestling as being Iranian pride and something, it is their national sport, but then there's also a homoerotic element, and he's living this life of where he's got a family and he must confine with the patriarchal standards of Iranian society. However, his desires for men are there, and he's trying to suppress the shame associated with them. In Iran, there's a particular structure. There's a patriarchal family, he's the head of the household, and there's an expected way to behave, etc. But then going to Sweden, he ends up finding he has a lot of freedom, and he questions his life decisions. And perhaps the concept of freedom in itself is perhaps too great to handle when you've been in such a rigid and self-censoring society. The film is extremely homoerotic, with lots of parting glances in the showers and the obviously body contact that wrestling provides. And I think the film could have gone further and had full-on sex. However, I would think that would diminish the purpose of the film, because by having this homoerotic, restricted, self-censoring element to it, we get the sense of Iman's shame and the way he self-censored himself rather than living his true, authentic self. So I think the way the director has made choices around sex and the choices around showing male bodies and the homoeroticism is so well utilised, and I really love the film for that. This is not just a queer story, it's also a migration story, charting the lives of refugees. It's based on the director's own personal experience in the 1980s when his family fled from Iran to Sweden, but also the experiences of more recent migrants and refugees who are based now in a similar accommodation in northern Sweden. I understand some of the extras and smaller characters were actually refugees, and he really utilizes those stories to really give this sense. And I also understand the experience of a refugee in Sweden is very much different. There's a lot more hostility than he experienced when his family was welcomed to the country. I think what's really good about this story is it really gives the characters agency. There's a tendency for Western films to really remove the agency of refugees by purely creating them as victims of the situation. And while, yes, they are certainly victims and sometimes have the most horrific experiences, that's not the only thing that defines them. They've got their own personalities. They've got their own complexities. Some refugees are not very nice. Some refugees have flaws and bad traits. Just because they're a refugee doesn't mean they lack agency and they lack character. This film gives them character, gives them agency. Iman in particular has a lot of toxic traits, lots of sort of repressed masculinity elements to him, and he's not necessarily always nice and does the right thing. And I think the film doesn't shy away from that because it's not trying to use the refugees to just make political points. He's trying to describe the situation, which is a lot more effective actually making those points than reducing refugees to just being about their refugee status. The film is exceptionally good at portraying the faults with the system rather than blame individuals. It shows the bureaucracy of the migration process. It takes so long to get decisions and going back and forth, the challenges of translation, the mental health issues that happen as a result of staying in this sort of confined accommodation in the snowiest parts of Sweden. I think the film is really effective at making a diagnosis about the system. And if refugees, migrants and immigrants can perhaps be processed a lot quicker, then some of the challenges could be resolved, and often would help refugees who want to return to their country when it's safe and able to do so. While the film is predominantly based around the Swedish system, I think there's probably lots of lessons other refugee and asylum systems could also learn from this film. This is a great film, and let's see how it did at this year's Oscar. So Sweden considered 3 films for their submission: Opponent, which I've just reviewed, Paradise is Burning, which is a great film about parentless children, and Together 99, Lucas Moodysson's follow-up to Together, which was released many years ago. All 3 could have easily been a submission as they were all high quality. Unfortunately, when Opponent was selected, it did not make the shortlisting phase, which is, I think, a bit of a disappointment and an oversight by the voters, because I think this is one of the better submissions from the ones I've seen. Based on the 48 submissions I have now seen, I would rank this as 5th, so I would definitely put forward this film as a nominated film in the final 5. However, that's just my personal opinion, and I don't actually get to say, which is unfortunate. So let's now delve into Sweden's history in the Academy Awards for this category. At the moment, Sweden is the 6th most successful country in the Best International Feature Film category. They have won a total of 3 Academy Awards in the category and had 30 nominations. Those 3 awards that they've won were for The Virgin Spring, Through a Glass Darkly, and Fanny and Alexander. All 3 of them are Ingmar Bergman films, so the last one was 41 years ago. So Sweden have not had much success in terms of taking home a statue. However, they still have some success in terms of the quality and getting to the shortlisting or the nomination phase. So I want to delve now more into more recent history for Sweden in the category at the Oscars. They have had 2 nominated films and 2 shortlisted films, and 6 that have failed to progress, including Opponent. The 2 nominated films include A Man Called Ove, which was remade into an American film starring Tom Hanks, and The Square. The 2 shortlisted films were Cairo Conspiracy and Force Majeure, Ruben Östlund's second film, which has gone beyond the submission process at the Academy Awards. And to be honest, I get the sense if Sweden want to do better in the Academy Awards, it's through him that's going to happen. He's going to need to do a Swedish language film or a non-English language film in order to achieve this, obviously. And he's now got the weight of a name which would help Sweden if he did so, especially as The Triangle of Sadness got a Best Picture nomination. But however, it was predominantly in English. And it's whether he's gone down the route of, I'm not doing Swedish language films, I'm doing English language films because of the, it's more profitable, they'll get wider distribution, etc., etc. But to me, that's one of the key things Sweden perhaps need to consider if they want to do well at the Academy Award. I think for me, Sweden always submits quality films. And for a country to sort of create momentum and continue to get shortlisted and nominated and potentially win, they have to churn out quality after quality after quality film every year to be considered. And I think Sweden is predominantly there. I just think they need to perhaps be wiser in their selection to make sure they are the most Academy-friendly films. And I thought Opponent might be that, but it just might not be the year that they particularly do that. So I'd be particularly keen to see what happens for the next Swedish submission. There was no big Swedish titles at Cannes, so we haven't yet got a signal that Sweden have got something big coming up. But stay tuned to this channel to see how Sweden and any other country who are submitting for the Academy Awards will do and what sort of films they will be submitting.